Mike experience, where you may call in if you have comments or ideas that you wish to raise. The number is 858-251-6111. That's 858-251-6111. Or you may join us on the net at godradio1.com. This is also streaming on the Voice and Viewpoint as well as Facebook and I believe YouTube. Dr. Thompson.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's good to be back here again. As you can imagine, it has been a jam-packed week, and I know that this is I won't say this isn't this going to press day today for you.
Oh, yes, we've already gone to press. We went this afternoon. The paper will be at our doorsteps at 5:30 or 6 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Yes, yes, yes. So it's always a very busy time, and this is again Women's History Month. And one of the things that I noticed is that I was very excited to see Toni Morrison getting a forever stamp. I thought that was a very powerful move, and I love actuality the actual photo that they used of her. Very lifelike, and it was just kind of like her imaging. And I think that it's so important that we make sure that we celebrate our outstanding females during Women's History Month. And I thought that was apropos that an African American female was honored.
Well, I think it's very important that we do that, Dr. Thompson, because although it's Women's Month, we really need a whole special month, if you will, just dedicated to black women. Because they have been the anchor, the rock. They have been the mothers. They've been the warrior kings in the family, and they have held things together when all efforts were made to destroy, separate, and cast under. And so I'm very excited. I think that we should honor the sisters every day. I think all men should treat their women as their queens in their lives, and sometimes that's difficult based on some people who forget who they are by virtue of the struggles that they've had. But it's an important time, and we're going to be doing more of that in the remaining weeks of this month. Although we celebrate Black History every week, and we celebrate Black women at every opportunity we get.
Amen. And one of the things about it, we've been very fortunate to have great women leaders throughout our history here in San Diego and actually throughout the country. If I was to celebrate one that is probably the most iconic African American female in my life, it would have been my mother.
Okay.
My mother was truly one of a kind, and they would say, "You are definitely Lydia Thompson's kid." And it's funny to look back on all the many things that she shared with us over the years to really strengthen us during this season and this time. And I see it rubbing off on the next generation because we're able to sow into them. And so I would say that during this Women's History Month, shout out to Lydia Esther Crosby Thompson.
Okay.
Was a true American hero.
Well, you can also include in that family tradition a shout out to your wife, Dr. Michelle Thompson, in terms of her achievements. And we're very fortunate. I was fortunate to have Jerry Warren, a real anchor in this community, and now Dolores Van Rensselaer Warren as partners and co-pillars with what we have to do. And they're so important because when we think of the women in our lives, especially our wives or today our girlfriends and sweethearts, I always think of Khalil Gibran and the prophet when Amina, the prophetess, said, "Speak to us of love," and she said that love is like the pillars that hold the temple up. The strength of the love is the distance between the pillars.
Yes.
And so I think that we have to have that, and a lot of the trashing of our culture and our language and the degrading of our women in particular comes from a generation that know not or knew not who maybe their parents were or missed the whole idea of what the respect and partnership should be. in terms of a male-female relationship.
Yeah, and one of the things about it is that how they say over time, things change, and I I could only take it back to the fact that we have multiple generations of young people, young adults, and adults that have never been to church, that have no foundation. And a lot of the foundation of how we treated each other, how we spoke to each other, how we honored each other was really based on the foundation of our walk in church. And so I think that for us to see the change that we want to see, we got to get back to church.
Well, I do agree that we need to get back to church. And to some people, that's become a dirty word. They don't like to talk about it. I have said for a very long time that the difference between the civil rights movement of yesterday and the struggle for equality today is not the numbers of people, but the absence of prayer life in terms of people having God involved in what they do.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of the generations behind us didn't have the kind of mothers that celebrated in Langston Hughes's Life Ain't Been No Crystal Staircase,
Uh-huh.
where the mother talked about her struggles and the mothers who struggle to put people where they are. And I think of some of the failures in spite of the struggle. I think of people like Ben Carson, whose mother really struggled to get him educated, and here he turns out to be one of the greatest, prenatal or surgeons in the history of medicine. But he drinks the Kool-Aid with Trump, and he goes off and he gets misused. If there was any position this man should have held, it should have been Secretary of Health and Human Services. He didn't know as much about housing as a mechanic knows about medicine. So we have this ongoing battle to separate us from our history. This month is the anniversary of the Black press in America. This is Black Press Month as of March 16th, going back to 1827 when it all started with Cornish and Rushworm up in upstate New York. And at first it was about the rights of all. It didn't just start off being Freedom's Journal, the first publication, but it evolved into that and to the idea that we must tell our stories and not other people. And today we still have a story to tell. We see the attack on that story and people like DeSantis, the people who don't understand critical race theory and making it an issue, banning books, removing discussions of slavery, Civil War, segregation, Jim Crow, the concept that anything that makes white kids uncomfortable shouldn't be taught, when we are the history of America. And this is a replication of what happened post-Reconstruction. So that while following the Civil War, we had blacks in all positions, 2 black senators from Mississippi. South Carolina gave us the first black superintendent of public instruction, members of Congress. Yet by 1900, the last black member of Congress was John Roy Lynch, and all of that had been wiped out through the counter laws that they're trying to make today to suppress voting, to remove voting machines, to change restrictions so that you got to have government IDs to vote, travel distances, gerrymandering voting precincts, using algorithms against black people and people of color to let a handful of racist right-wing whites seek to institute apartheid in America in the year 2023.
Yeah, and one of the things about just how we're looking at where we're at today, how we're looking at history, how we're looking at how we move forward, has to go back to understanding that we have to continue to read. And where best to read is, we have the books, we used to have the encyclopedia, but it's always something about the feel and the reading of paper and using it as a, like I say, for yours, it's like a living history, a weekly history, something that we can use as a tool. And it's funny because I tell people all the time, I watch people literally pick up the Voice and Viewpoint and review it before they go talk to people so that they make sure that they at least know what's going on in the black community.
It's very interesting because from the very beginning, it's interesting how God works to do things. I grew up thinking that journalists and lawyers were brilliant, and I grew up around a lot of brilliant people, and I felt like a butter knife in a steak drawer.
Hmm.
And all of the time I was absorbing information and experiences that I had no idea how they were going to be used. And
Hmm.
50 years later, I'm an accumulation of all this information, these encounters. I mean, when I go into the post office before they started rationing stamps with black people on them,
Hmm.
I see all of these stamps with prominent African Americans, and my wife bought a couple of those big 3-ring notebooks, double volumes that
Hmm.
had each person's story and contribution. And I'm looking at these people, and I'm realizing how many of them I interacted with in my lifetime who are gone, and it gives you a very special sense of history and a presence. And you're right. As I've written this week in celebrating 196 years of the Black press,
Hmm.
I've talked about the importance of us getting reacquainted with our history. That's why we're continuing to run the words of the Negro National Anthem.
Hmm.
Hopefully, people will tear that page out and hold on to it and
Hmm.
learn those words and absorb the pain. And if it wasn't for the Black press, we wouldn't know about the stony road that we've trod, or the bitterness of the chastening rod being the slavery beating
Hmm.
of our people. We wouldn't understand the words when he says, not let us be drunk with the wine of the world, lest we forget thee. And yet we have not only gotten drunk with the wine of the world, but the ways of the world,
Hmm.
that we are moving further away from God and salvation. And it's so interesting because prophetically, in the 12th chapter of Romans, in the second verse in the Bible, it says that be ye not conformed, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. How? Through the word of God.
Hmm.
And we have gotten away from that word. We have allowed freedom of religion, which allows everyone to worship who and what they wish in this country. As one of the preamble tenets of this society, we have allowed people to criticize us for not worshiping the way they worship, and we have moved away
Hmm.
from our God. And so I am very concerned about us, and
Hmm.
I am very concerned that so much of the lifestyle and the ways of people today makes a relationship with God incompatible, because God doesn't embrace what they do and how they live.
Hmm.
And we all suffer if we do not, as individuals of prayer, uh, stay in prayer. Well, this is the kind of conversation, Dr. Thompson, that won't yield us a lot of phone calls and expressions from folks, because we've reached a point some seem to be afraid to speak up. But I think
Well,
it's still important that we speak.
yeah, and I was just looking at some of the headlines and things that are taking place. They say that they officially put the end. February 28th was the official end of the COVID considerations, the extra resources that were being put. So where do we go from here? And do a lot of people go out of business? Do we go back to having COVID in San Diego? We had over, I think, 200,000 cases of COVID, but over 500 or 5,700 plus people passed away of COVID here in San Diego.
And people are still dying of COVID here in San Diego. I think that when you say, where do we go from here? A lot of people are going to go straight to the mortuary, because we still have 500 deaths a day in this country
Hmm.
from COVID. And we have modifications of it. Mild COVID. We now have that Paxlovid that you can take that will help with that. And you do have some people that are still wearing masks. I know we still required in our business, when people come in, we give them a mask in terms of the importance of it. And so I just think that, in a sense, we have to live with it.
Hmm.
And the ones who have the greatest difficulty, the most vulnerable, are those of us who have the kind of jobs that put us in contact with people without the option of not working.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that we're seeing, um, I'm wondering what the lawsuits are going to look like because just recently we had some professors terminated from City College because they refused to take the vaccination. They tried, in this case, one of the young ladies had requested a medical. What is it, forgiveness because of the fact that she was having a high risk pregnancy. That was denied, and thus ultimately they terminated. But then now we're seeing that even the chancellor is being set down. So there's a lot of things that are going on. So I'm curious of since the city and other people are taking away those requirements, how long will the other colleges and everything? Because the colleges took it away for the students, but didn't take it away from the professors.
Well, that story about wanting an exemption for pregnancy, it was already established by female doctors, many of whom were pregnant at the height of the pandemic, that the vaccine did not harm the unborn child. I'm finding as I listen to people who refuse to get vaccinated, and I have a couple parishioners like that, and it just boggles my mind because you got polio and tuberculosis, and you got every shot that they brought along that helped you get to this point. And you, for some strange reason, with no logical explanation, have decided that the vaccine is harmful to you, and you put yourself in a position to catch the virus and infect other people. And as long as we have people who refuse to get vaccinated, we're going to have an ongoing development and spread of mutations within the COVID family. I mean, the way we stamped out polio and tuberculosis was that everybody got vaccinated to the extent that there was no place for the virus to go.
Yeah.
All right. And now we have a brand of polio coming back, which is immune to penicillin because people have taken so many antibiotics that their bodies have gotten to the point that it doesn't work. So we we can't argue with people. I have a family member that refuses to get vaccinated, and I won't let them in my house. They can't come visit, so there's no need coming near because it makes no sense.
Okay, so moving forward, they're trying to find out where they're still trying to do the research of where it started, but do you think they're really going to ever find it where it really started?
I don't think it really matters at this point where it started with, millions of people dead, over 1,300,000 in this country alone, people still dying. What difference is it going to make where it started? You can't do anything about China, even if they stood up and said we did it. The laboratory that they think it came from had research that was being financed by American dollars. And it's almost like the movie Contagion coming to life, where the bat infected a pig in a butcher shop. The person handling the pig shook hands with a visiting American. She in turn carried the virus to a social setting, and it just multiplied and spread. And so, fantasy has become fact, and we're not dealing with it. But I think that we can't afford to deal with any one issue anymore exclusively. Black people in particular need to become multiple issue oriented in terms of things that are going on. We just can't, we can't just be about the virus. We can't just be about, the racism in the culture because it's always been there. We can't just be mad with laws that are being passed to restrict us because we always found ways around it. So they take books out of the libraries, out of the schools. We still have churches that have the capacity to have books and have volunteers teach. Children can't read because they've been ambushed by social media, and now they aren't learning to write. And so it just takes 25 years for us to revert back to being an ignorant society and no longer able to maintain a place on the world scale. And it represents the demise of our country and our greatness in spite of a handful of people who are diligently working and struggling and seeking to carry us forward. Like the sister who invented the found the vaccine for COVID.
I'm looking at all the things that are taking place. So I just want to talk about some hot topics. I'm gonna put them over in front of you. Uh, and this one has been a hot topic, and they're saying they're going to start talking about San Diego's have more than 3,000 cameras on streetlights. Are all neighborhoods treated equally?
Of course, they're not going to be treated equally. This is just like the inscription written on the barn in Animal Farm, you know. And what did the pigs write on the barnyard door? All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. All of us are going to be under scrutiny, and some of us are going to be under more scrutiny than others. Um, they didn't follow due process, and this is something we keep raising. Black Men and Women United. It's not just about you and I because we are the media entities of our community, but it was a requirement, due process, notice, opportunity to respond. And even from a governmental standpoint, when Biden wanted to do away with Section 42, Title 42, that Trump implemented, and he tried to do it with executive order, the courts rejected it because they didn't do a notice period, a comment period. In other words, they didn't do due process. And in San Diego, it's become a dead term. There is a belief that because we stuck something on the internet, that represents due process. And yet we know still almost 50% of our population is not online. So who are they playing to? They are playing to a select elite element of the community, which is more and more going to make decisions for the total population. And more the masses are going to be reacting rather than proactive. Just like I remind people that 49% of the residents of San Diego County are renters. Well, if they were also voters, we wouldn't have this homeless situation on the scale that we do, because we would do something about developers and apartment owners and the available units versus the affordable units, and the people on the streets who are only going to increase when the apartment association which is the thing that a lot hide behind. They encourage these first, last security deposits. The poor people making minimum less than $15 an hour, it's suggested they need a minimum of $25 an hour just to breathe in San Diego. And we know people are not making that kind of money. And so they can't move. They can be evicted almost for any reason now. And so the idea has always been keep the masses so busy that they don't have time to plan a strategy against the suppression coming at them, and they'll never catch up.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about it. Even when I look at the camera lights, the question comes in is, so we put up more cameras. If we can't keep the lights lit, then how can we keep the cameras working? And will they only work in poor communities, but find themselves the lights working in the more affluent communities, but the cameras not working in the affluent communities, but the lights are not working in the poorer communities, but the cameras are?
Well, yeah, and the cameras will be compatible with the change that they made in the lighting about 15, almost 20 years ago. And they went to the what we call the orange lights, some call the sulfur lights that we have. And we found out that that made a difference in terms of night vision and how people saw things. It's funny because I lived in rural San Diego for so many years, where it gets truly dark, where it gets truly quiet, where you can hear a car coming over the hill a mile away, and you can hear people in the summer on the other side of the mountain they're talking because of how sound carries. And in the city, you just get inundated with the sirens and the loud motorcycles and all the other noise pollution that takes place. And so the cameras here are going to be pretty much like you find in places like London. When they have crimes over there, you can see them in that network, and they get those cameras together. You already see it on television. You look at things like NCIS Los Angeles. Everything is wired in cameras, and they can follow. And it's past Big Brother. Big Brother's he's been here so long, he's gotten old.
Yeah, my question would be, is there a rhyme or reason on how they select where they put the cameras? Because, are they saying that cameras are going to go into all major thoroughfares? You know, how are they literally determining where cameras should go?
It's not hard, Dr. Thompson. This has already been done in so many cities and countries that they can just pull up the options and look at what they want to do. They're going to cover every major freeway, every major thoroughfare. They're going to put cameras in alleys in our neighborhoods and tell people it's safety when crime is virtually down in our predominant districts, although it might be up nationally in other areas. And so it's just, the president's already moved to block them giving surplus military equipment to police departments. If you want to see the irony of what was done, just go both to El Cajon and to National City. And it is amazing to see that in both of those places, the police department is bigger than the municipal government buildings. And that's because of that first wave of crime money to pump up the police departments. And it's ironic that City Hall in National City it looks like a little outlet compared to the police compound across the street. And so the idea is just continue to prepare for the suppression of protests so that we move in the direction of the authoritarian government that some people want. And the ones that want it are not going to relinquish the fight. And the ones who are the victims of it don't seem to want to get engaged in the fight other than a few people.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's one of the things that, always ask, not only the placement of the cameras, but how they're funded, how they are maintained, who's watching the cameras, and how you have all these cameras. So who do we hire all these new people to be able to monitor and be a part of it? Because you just can't have cameras and then not have monitors.
Well, they already got all that worked out, Dr. Thompson. It doesn't take a lot of people to sit with the camera and monitor business. I remember probably some 20 years ago when I first opened my paper in Florida. I went in a Hardy one day, one of the Hardy restaurants like McDonald's. And as I observed this place, I noticed that I didn't see anyone there who seemed to be a supervisor. And so I asked this young African American there, I said, well, who is supervising this work environment? Because everybody is just doing their jobs and they're just so committed and busy and stuff. And he pointed up to a camera. He says, right there. And when I really did some investigation, in the South, counties are spread out in locations, but they had one central location where they had the room for monitoring, and they were able to track all of their stores in 4 or 5 counties from that one room and to track the employees in terms of their proficiency in business. And that's where we're headed. It'll just be fewer people watching more folks. And we'll continue to making the plea for more police officers under the pretense of beat cops and walking the streets and stuff like that. But that will never get to the point that it might have been at one time because of this whole Big Brother approach.
Okay. Well, let me go on to another law enforcement question. The in-custody deaths. We've had another in-custody death while in the jail system here. Negligence, poor planning, people ain't paying attention. What's going on?
Well, in some places, they're holding the sheriff responsible, the people over the jail for whatever negligence is taking place in terms of the monitoring leading up to the death of people. There will always be these stories about we were there, we didn't know. One of the latest cases, they took the position, I'm trying to remember where this was, that the medical examiner's ruling went from accidental death to a homicide because the position was that if the person had received the medical attention that all the signs indicated, they would have never died. And the reality is that when people go into custody, the the legal system, the law enforcement end, treats you as if you have already been convicted. There is hostility. We've seen people left locked in cars in the garage, people beaten or drugged through the into the buildings, and all kinds of mistreatment in terms of the way, and it's just the overall attitude of the culture that once you come in contact with the system, even if you have not been tried or convicted, and you're just being brought in, the entry into the criminal justice system is met with hostility and cruelty, and the absence of acknowledging even the most basic human rights. And so the in custody death issue needs to continue to be investigated. I salute some of the people here, like Sister Tasha Williams, who's always raising questions, Sister Francine Maxwell of our Black Men and Women United, who really stays on this issue. And as I know, the last count that I saw, San Diego County had more in custody deaths than any county in California.
Yeah, and one of the things about it, Ms. Williamson just put up there that they left him so long and failed to give him medical treatment that even his food had bugs in it. You know what I'm saying? Literally, when you could start attracting bugs because for a lack of attendance and paying attention to it. And I think that just because you find yourself incarcerated does not mean that you are to be mistreated or brutalized or not given the basic medical needs that you have, and people pay attention to it.
But yet we know from Ms. Williams' work and other people like her who joined her, like the lady who was stopped in La Jolla and the sister that she died in the backseat of the car and mysteriously needed medical attention, didn't get it. We have a short-term memory as a people. We hear things, we see a flash, it's not us, we don't know them, so we don't get concerned about people. And then when something happens to us, we want the whole world to stop and come look out for us. And my position is, if you come to me, what have you done for anybody else? Did you stop to be concerned about someone else? Because if you didn't, why? Outside of the fact that if they succeed in mistreating you, it'll lead to more of us being mistreated. But outside of concern for the collective, why should you get any kind of special attention when you don't care enough about other people like you want them to care about you?
Yeah. And one of the things I would say is simply this. And when you become woke, when you become aware of what's going on, then you are obligated once you wake up, because some people are still asleep, but once you wake up, you are then obligated to stay in the fight. You cannot then go back to sleep. And I think so many people are sleeping on the job right now, sleeping on the community, thinking that someone else will do it. But stop passing the baton. If you see that the work needs to be done, do the work. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's just not here, Dr. Thompson. I found this, in the past 56 years, I found this across the country. I saw it in D.C. when I was a young man, elected official, and knocking on doors and walking, trying to get people involved, and they just didn't care until it was their turn. And now a city which was predominantly black looks like, a bowl of vanilla ice cream with a few raisins scattered through it, because they're being removed.
Well, but on the way to the White House, you see a whole bunch of African Americans on the way. But once you get through to the White House, seems far and few between. Let me the next topic I want to talk about, because it's disturbed me, so I want to ask you to throw your input on it. It says, these officers committed misconduct, but what were their consequences? So we have, it says right here, it started off as simply a call to the police about 3 young men being drunk in public. It ended with one young man bleeding from his face after being smashed into the police vehicle, another wedged between seat and the back of the police car, covered in pepper spray. This is the things that are happening, but nothing ever said whatever happened to the officers.
Well, and nothing really will happen. We're going to see if we have this new CCP effort civilian, policing commission. But what's happened in the past is a complaint is brought. Um, it goes before the police citizens advisory group. An investigation is started, but then at the end of the investigation, the matter is deemed a personnel matter, and because it's a personnel matter, you don't know whether a letter went into their files or didn't go, because you can't open the police records in terms of personnel files. And what people miss here in San Diego is that while you're looking at the police chief and the police department, there are two key entities that never seem to get brought into this picture. One is the POA, the Police Officers Association, which is now in the midst of trying to renegotiate a contract. And every contract they do limits the power of the police department itself to deal with the conduct of officers, because that's how strong the association has become. The other element is that we're now under a strong mayor form of government, and at any given time, the mayor can tell the police chief to take a hike, and he's out of a job. Landau is the only one who ever verbalized that when he said before he was dismissed that he served at the pleasure of the mayor. And so we don't have any actions being taken. We still have our communities being over-policed in terms of reaction. You cannot legislate through rulemaking the attitudes that cops bring to the job, okay? And we know that attitude is not restricted to white cops, as we see in the case of the young man murdered in
Memphis.
In Memphis, that it doesn't stop there, okay? And so we as a community have to get engaged. And if we get engaged, then it's going to make a difference. You can see what just happened in the case where the Justice Department got involved after the murder of Breonna Taylor. And now we see a consent decree being implemented and somebody watching over the system, but that doesn't change the system.
Yeah.
Because in Memphis, the situation that took place there, 50 or 60% of the police force was black. There's a black police chief involved, and and it was black officers that did what was done.
Yeah.
And we have some crazy black officers in the San Diego Police Department as well.
Yeah, and I think ultimately we have to get back to officers being really a part of the community and also respecting that they are there to protect and serve. And if they really don't believe that, then they really should not be in the position to protect and serve.
Neither one will happen. First of all, to protect and serve is just a slogan written on the car, okay? And once in a while, you'll find an officer with a stream, a stem of human decency that will treat people as folks, because not all officers are bad. But too many of those that we run in contact with, because I've seen situations where you speak to the officer and he looks at you like you're some kind of fool for even saying hello, where others are courteous people who have that streak of humanity. So we, the public, are responsible for what we let them get away with, because when we start rallying, we've seen the results by Black Votes Matter, Black Lives Matter, the people that have gotten involved and said, we're not going away. You've seen in other cities, and ironically, so many of the people who have marched in protest of police violence, oftentimes there are more young white people there than there are blacks involved in those protests. But we just don't seem to be capable in San Diego of getting too excited about anything.
So with that being said, I know that our current police chief is soon to retire. Have they announced the process of replacing him? Is there going to be a true search, or are they just going to pull from within?
Well, they're going to go through the motions for the search, just like they got to go through the motions with the county to replace the chief administrative officer. And they brought a certain assistant black chief in thinking that they're going to make him the next chief. But I think that that would be one of the greatest mistakes in the world, because that individual is not fit for or suited for the position. And I think that we got to get away from the idea that because people look like us, that they should be given opportunities that they didn't really earn. Okay, and so that's a big issue for me. But as long as we are anesthetized and semi-tranquilized, so that we just kind of wobbling. We won't go out to meetings and stay too long at night. Back east, when nighttime comes, that's when the people come out. That's when the other system of government kicks in. People will stay in meetings at 9, 10, 12 o'clock at night. They're fighting for change, and they're going to make sure that what happens the next day is a reflection of the night. You can't get people here to stay up, or first you can't even get them out on certain days, and God help if it's cold or cloudy. Uh, so I mean, it's just it's a repeat of history where people get upset when they are oppressed, but as long as they have some degree of space to breathe, they will find excuses not to get involved.
Okay. All right. Want to go to some international news just across the border, where we had the four African Americans that went over there for plastic surgery, get caught up in a drug war, a drug situation, and two lost their lives. Is this something more and more we're gonna be seeing happen, and should they have a no travel advisory at this point?
Well, Dr. Thompson, 2 weeks before this incident, the State Department issued a very detailed list of every place and state in Mexico to stay away from. Again, we don't read, we don't think it applies to us, and we just keep going. I mean, we have a situation here just down Rosarita of a public defender that was murdered down there, and they said it was an accident. It didn't stop people from going across the border. It gave my heart great concern when my daughter lived across the border. She finally moved back here. But we have a lot of people who live south of the border because they can't afford to live here.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, you can get a 2-bedroom house down there for $500-$600.
Yeah.
And the same thing
On the
over
beach.
Yeah, on the beach. Over here, it's going to cost you $2,000 or $3,000, to even come close to the kind of space and ambiance you got.
And it ain't even next to a beach. It's
No.
it's next to a waterway.
Yeah, that's it. And that's not next to it. So, but again, they say 21% of Mexico's GNP comes from tourism. And if we the tourists, stayed out of the country, it would be a hurt. It put a hurt on them during the pandemic in terms of it. Tourism was putting such a hurt on Tijuana that's why we ended up with the Century Pass system some 20 years ago. Because I was in a meeting with the people from both sides of the border when they started talking about we got to basically erase the border. They had same plans for the Rodriguez Airport in Mexico. They wanted, and I think they finally built one, they wanted a land bridge where you could park and cross over, catch a plane over there. And if you were going south like Acapulco Cabo or Mexico City, the fact that you caught a plane in Mexico reduced the fare tremendously because you didn't have the international tariffs associated with it, okay?
Exactly.
And you still got it even in the cruise ship industry. If you go to Hawaii, coming back, you're going to stop in Encinitas because there has to be one international port. Hawaii is a U.S. state, and so they'll find those places. But at one point, Mazatlan, after a couple of murders and stuff with tourists, they even took it off the list of places to stop. And so people are going to keep going. They're not going to read and respond, even though the list is there. And it is raising the question about healthcare here in terms of what we do here and the kind of services that are available there. In many instances, more modern and better than what we have here at cheaper prices.
Yeah. I actually had a colleague of mine go down there and get a whole set of implants, and it was going to cost them $50,000 here, and it cost them $20,000 there.
Yeah. And people go there. We're going there for pharmaceutical issues, but I know there's some doubt cast with that because they're finding some of the lesser drug facilities have the drugs laced with fentanyl.
Yeah.
And so that's the issue. So we got a lot of issues going on, and I would think that most of us are oblivious to many of the things that we just discussed because they don't see how it impacts them, so they don't get involved until something happens.
Well, Dr. Warren, we in the last few minutes of the show, I kind of want to talk about a couple of things. Your editorial this week, give a snapshot of that, as well as some of the highlights of the paper that's coming out tomorrow morning.
Well, of course, it'll be online in the morning. The editorial really celebrates the 196 years of the black press in terms of what we have when we read, and I talk about an important part of history because, when we had papers like the Chicago Defender that Abbott and them published on a weekly basis, one of the things that made it work for us was that these papers were being published in a time of the Great Migration. As people were coming from the South, they were headed into Chicago because with the completion of the train hookups to the West, the cattle were being brought to Chicago, the great slaughterhouses. There was a shortage of workers, and so the blacks who had worked in the fields, when they were able to get jobs in the slaughterhouses, in order to house them, instead of having them spread out, they built those tall buildings like Cabrini Green that you saw in Good Times and all of that stacking of people. But then you had the trains before the airplanes came were the means of travel. And so first class travel often was a private car connected to a regular train. And the snowbirds, which is what the people from the cold places, New York and places, they would go south for the winter to places like Florida. And they would have black porters on the train to care and take care of them. And many times those porters coming out of Chicago would have the stacks of papers and magazines, and as it stopped or passed through a black town, even if it didn't stop, they would throw these things off to the people, and they were circulated in the community because the printed word was worth something.
Yeah.
And so we've gone away now that we have everything at our fingertips. We don't want to read because we're so hooked on social media and believing what we see that we miss out on keeping up with what makes a difference to our survival.
Well, I actually find social media very entertaining. But it's also affords you many times a sense of laziness because social media, you must continue to feed it every day, and so with that comes a whole bunch of nonsense that people think or take as reality, which is really not reality. It's not well researched, and sometimes it's not researched at all, and yet people believe it. Just recently, I saw that they said rest in peace to a famous Justin Bieber. Rest in peace. And in a heartbeat, everybody's like, "Oh, Justin's gone," and all of a sudden, you had to go to the Wikipedia site that said Justin's still alive. That's just that social media nonsense. So social media serves its purpose, but you can't use it as your educational resource. Education is that you have multiple strands of information, but make sure that they're reliable strands.
Well, that's very important, Dr. Thompson, because right now we have this war on TikTok, and we want to stop it because of Chinese ownership in terms of what's going on there. But then we can't just stop it because our kids spend so much time that TikTok's decided that they're going to implement a rule that, within an hour, they're going to have lockdowns to freeze kids out unless the parents have a passcode. But the same TikTok, in terms of China, puts what they put up for their kids is science and math and the governmental propaganda. And so they are being educated while we're just being distracted.
We've been educated too.
Yeah, away from,
Yeah.
We don't have any sense of nationalism or patriotism or loyalty. We just concerned about what we can get.
And and the one thing about it is that the way they're feeding this social media frenzy is people are starting to make money. And so now they're making money becoming influencers. And so they're from home and they have to post 5 and 6 and 7 times a day to continue to keep their monies up. And some people are making a tremendous amount of money, and TikTok, that's what they're hoping, is that the people that are making money will step up and say, no, we need our TikTok because it is a part of our livelihood.
Well, they don't even have to step up. It's so entwined with us that even as we talk about Congress regulating TikTok, they can't afford to cut it off because of the impact that it'll have on businesses here.
Yeah.
And so, but all of these are the issues that are at stake. When we're being distracted, we're being kept away from books that can enhance us. We're not being encouraged to read or learn to read. Some of us are, thank God. We don't know how to write. We're undisciplined. We can't stand being still. And in places like Korea, when you look at how their kids are being raised and programmed, and it took me many years to understand that the main reason in many of these countries that they teach martial arts to the kids is to develop discipline. And anything that comes from it is a byproduct of the discipline.
Yeah.
If a child won't sit still today, we declare that he's ADHD, and so we want to throw some drugs in him, and yet there's nothing happening in the home life that encourages discipline. You see that when they have them in the bank, in the airport, the little monsters are running wild and they chasing them and smiling like they think it's funny. We didn't grow up with that foolishness. All they had to do was look at us, and we got a backhand. We knew better than to act like that.
Dr. Ward, I won't say all people are the same because, the other day I saw my daughter discipline my granddaughter, and I wanted to go over in the corner and be quiet.
I know. It hurts you when you first see it.
It's funny because
Yeah.
you see yourself,
Yeah.
but you be like, is she on steroids? Because
Yeah.
she's a little bit more tougher than
Yeah.
than what we remember.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important that we continue to implement the things that brought us thus far.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Still spare the rod, spoil the child. You know what I'm saying? I tell people I never like whooping my child, right? I could probably count on one hand how many times I had to whoop my child. But I thank God that there was a balance between mother and father.
Yeah.
But mother
Knew when to whoop.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it seemed like the parent that whoops the most seemed to have the most love.
Yeah.
Because afterwards they crawl up underneath us and trying to make sure that they're good again.
Yeah. Yeah. No, moms know when to whoop. I remember the first time my late wife whooped our son when he was little. He's 34 now. I forget what he did, and she was just really getting that butt. And he stopped and he looked up at her and he said, "I know what you tried to do. You tried to kill me." she said, "Yeah, I'm gonna kill you, all right." But she didn't let up on the whipping. But we gotta have you can't bring that after they get grown. How many people come to you and I complaining about the inability to handle their children because they waited too long?
Yeah.
5 years old is too long and
Yeah.
too late.
Yeah.
You need to start it off right.
Yeah.
And they'll be okay if you start right.
Yeah, and the funny thing about it is that, especially when my mother used to discipline me, it was always like at the end she's like, "But I love you."
Yeah.
I remember the one statement that she would always say, "I would rather deal with you here than have a police officer deal with you out there."
Right.
So if I discipline you here, no one else has to discipline you out there.
Right.
And I think that is the message that we need parents to get through to their children. The discipline that you get here will stop you from having to be disciplined out there. Because we was always saying in our program, if you won't take charge of yourself, somebody else will take charge of you.
That's what my father used to say. If you don't know, there's a guy in a uniform out there that'll help you. And of course in those days that guy didn't kill you, he talked to you. Nowadays, they just rather shoot you than have a conversation.
Yeah, and I think that helping young people to understand, and their parents, because we're not just talking about the young people of the day, we're talking about the parents and the parents. We're talking, we literally would have to really go back to grandparents.
Yep.
To really begin to trickle it down to the parents, to the children, because again, we've had so much cut off, so much of the culture. There was a point that when you were African American, you knew the Black National Anthem.
Oh yeah.
You knew more than just Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
And some of them can't say Martin Luther King is Martha Luther King.
So,
Yeah.
so it is imperative for us now to go back in history, and our history is expanded. Now we can say that there is a black president. There was a black president. You can say there is a black vice president. There is a black Secretary of State of California. There's more history that has been made, but we also have to know that to understand our history is really truly to understand our greatness. And history, and I have to say it this way. There used to be a time where if you got in trouble at school, by the time you got home, you've been talked to, disciplined, whooped before you even got home, because it was a community. It was a village.
Yeah.
We have to get back to that village again, where we begin to look out for one another. When we see a person struggling, instead of saying, "Ooh, they're struggling," hey, why don't you come over and have some food? You know what? I went to the store and I bought this for me, and I bought some for you too. You know what I'm saying? I went fishing, and I'm not going to put everything in the freezer. I got enough to share with you. You feel what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Those were the days.
Yeah.
And those are the times that we must get back to for us to literally grow our society.
Well, let us say in fairness, Dr. Thompson, that we have a lot of people among us that are doing all the things that you said. We don't want to get the impression that the whole world is bad.
Yeah.
We got a lot of good people that are share, that are knock on doors, that are take people in. When you see an accident, there are people who stop and try to render aid right away. Everybody doesn't get out of their car and stand there and watch a person die when somebody can be of some help.
Yeah.
And so we have people that will do that. There are good people, but good people aren't celebrated. Good people don't sell press, and they don't sell news stories. And when we first briefly went into this business, we made a decision that we were going to just tell good stories. And we told good stories, and the paper stayed on the rack and on the newsstand. But the moment I wrote a story about Granny on crack, it sold out. Because I guess they want to know whose granny it was. But the point, and so we haven't gotten off that boat to a large extent. And I really want to see if you and I keep talking and keep sharing. We know that there's some people listening. We know that when we do Black Men and Women United, and we invite people to sign on, we ask for your emails to come through the Voice and Viewpoint, because we cannot put our link up in general, because we've seen people crash Zoom meetings with all kinds of things that take place. And so we have some controls over that. But it's a safe place to be and to come and to talk, and you don't have to leave home to participate.
Well, the funny thing is you gave me an idea, and that's provocative titling. You know what I'm saying? Granny on crack. Boy, that's a good one. You know what I'm saying? I would imagine people going to say, oh, I want to read that one.
Well, in those days they did. Now Granny on crack wouldn't even, stir it up. It'd have to be something like Pastor on crack. And then they'd listen to that.
That's going to be another topic that we have to bring up, because all this growing up this and growing up that, boy, there's some new series that are coming out. But, Dr. Warren, as you can imagine, we're at the end of our show. Any final words?
Yeah. No, I enjoy doing this, and we encourage you to get more involved with your neighbors. If you can get out, get to church, put some God time in. If you can't get out, open your Bible. Open whatever your faith is. Prayer will yield you some results. And so we just encourage you to do that, because that's one of the greatest instruments that we can use in this time of mental health crisis.
Amen.
Is that connection.
Amen. Well, with that being said, this is From the Desk of the Elder with Dr. John Warren. God say the same. You're going to be traveling next week, right?
Yes, but I'll be here. It'll be after this that I'll be going back east for a series of meetings and celebrations of Black Press Month.
All right. So if God said the same, we'll see you back here the next Wednesday, same time, same channel, right here on